Guys, if you could switch off the mic, please. If you're having difficulties, I can mute. So this would be the recording. Well, the recording, no, recording for those who watch it after. This would be the second module of the space-time structures, and today, well, in the first one, we're kind of just seeing this base structure, yeah, this base structure of life, of reality, this kind of underlying principles of, well, what we could call the feminine and the masculine, and which is kind of like that left, that right, and then this non-lineal and the lineal, which we could call, well, the upper part and the downer part. And between this combination and this relationship, we have the four quadrants, which are going to give us the base areas of how a consciousness is expressed. Yeah, on the upper, well, on the feminine, it's very, like I said, it's very hard to reduce or synthesize the feminine essence. Yeah, not the expressions of the feminine, but the essence. And probably the simplest basic way would be something which has this, it's a receptor, yeah? And then we have the masculine, which in the essence in its most simplest would be an emitter, because in its essence, space-time reality is a system of communication. And a system of communication, it's a technology of nothingness. Yeah, we could say, look, we could put it in different levels of technology. Yeah? Well, what is a technology? Let's start. What's technology? Because we think technology is something like that the humans do. Yeah, but I think technology is principle of life. Yeah, technology is just something. It's allowing to create something, we could say, that gives us a function that before creating it didn't exist. Yeah, so we could say it add value. That's what a technology is. It add value. Yeah, so for example, look, with my body I can't draw. Yeah, okay, if I had sand I could. Yeah, but I can't really, I don't have ink. Yeah, so what I do is find a way to create something that allows me to draw. Yeah, well, a pen, a pencil, and in this case, a board marker. That's a technology. A technology is it's a way of ordering something to create a new value. Yeah. So nothingness or emptiness, this source level, this fundamental source level, nothingness, which is different names that we use. But remember, the name is just for our mind to be able to reference something, which, the important thing, essentially we are all connected to. That's why it resonates. For those who are permeable to that resonance, yeah? Because not everybody is open to that resonance with that essential level, yeah, that source level. We put the name emptiness. Another word we could also use is the indivisible, not divided. Yeah. Now, what is the first technology that emerges out of nothingness? Yeah, like nothingness is probably the how could I say? Like the great Steve Jobs of reality. Yeah? So nothingness creates something that to add value, which it didn't have in the first, in its let's say in its initial point, which is consciousness. Now this is nothingness is nothing. It's non-divisible. So, and this, I can explain it logically, theoretically, but also if we connect with this point that the essential, original, fundamental point, it isn't consciousness. Consciousness is the first technology that emerges out of it. Yeah, that's why I say, you know, there's people that say that after life, there's life after life, and I say, yeah, that's true, because there's aspects of consciousness that doesn't depend on existence. Yeah, doesn't depend on existence. And other people say, no, there's nothing. You go to nothing, and that's also true, because that is like, it is just a more fundamental starting point. Yeah, probably the confusion is that these are simultaneous. It's like when existence ends, it's not like you go back to nothing. It's that nothingness is coexisting with consciousness. So the great technology emerging out of nothingness is consciousness, which adds value to its possibilities. What is the value that it adds? The possibility of self-communication, self-observation, self-awareness. Yeah. Now, out of consciousness, another technology emerges, which is what we call space-time, or existence, reality. Okay, but reality, existence, is a technology of consciousness. So it's kind of like, and again, like probably it can sound theoretical, but you can kind of, how can I say, you can sense these areas within ourselves. Probably what is good for our mind is to have a way of naming them to differentiate them. Yeah, that is probably what we're trying to do here. Actually, we're trying to use parameters to recognize what's already there. Yeah, parameters to recognize what's already there. So now, when consciousness creates this technology called space-time, it seems to be that there is a structure behind it. It isn't just a chaotic, let's see what happens. It seems to be that there is this underlying kind of blueprint, which has many ways of expressing itself, but at the end, it has this fundamental structure, yeah, which is this feminine, masculine. And then these two areas, which is, because when we're talking about existence, we're talking about individual vehicles. That is something that consciousness in its fundamental sense isn't individual. It isn't like personal. It's nothing and everything recognizing itself. So it's an absolute consciousness, you know. Now, when it creates this space-time reality, it's creating another added value, which is for that non-divided consciousness to be able to divide itself. And that gives an added value, because now it can explore itself, it can communicate itself through different angles, which is something that it didn't have previously, you see. That's why I call it technologies. It's adding value to the initial point, okay? So now nothingness can not only have the possibility of communication with itself, now it has the possibility of exploring itself through different, it's like, let me put this analogy. It's like you have in this initial source, non-divided, and it has this first division, nothing, everything, we could say. Or let's put it in colors because it's very clear, black and white. Now it's an absolute awareness of itself. Now, the second unfoldment, or the second technology called space-time existence, has another beautiful thing, is that this white can open itself into the rainbow. Meaning it can explore different aspects that it has within itself. You see? So we could say that these are different technologies really of this indivisible. It's different technologies of the indivisible. Now, you see, the confusion that tends to happen with us is that this is the complicated point a lot of times, is that we think that once it creates, or it's not a linear thing. It's not like it started in one moment, because that is seeing it in time. Like, first it created consciousness, and then it created existence, and like, okay, so once it created existence, nothingness kind of ended. That's the way science would see it. You see, science would see, okay, the Big Bang and nothingness was before the Big Bang. And once the Big Bang started, nothingness became something. No, is that it's simultaneous dimensions occurring at the same time. You see what I mean? That's why, like, for example, if I die, you say, okay, well, what happens to David, to my consciousness? Well, we could say, okay, it stops existing. David stops existing. But it's not all that true, because my elements just are going to recreate itself into something else. And so what happens? So, oh, you go to consciousness. Yeah, but consciousness is already there. Okay. So, okay, so you go back to nothingness. Okay, the thing is that this is the error. It's like thinking that because of having consciousness, emptiness is eclipsed. And because you have existence, consciousness, that essential consciousness, is it eclipsed. It's not that really. It's happening simultaneously. The thing is that the volume of our focus changes. Like, what tends to happen during the day, you know, when we during the day, what tends to happen is that the volume of focus goes into the angle. Yeah. But when I sleep, it goes back into the non-divisible. And it, you know, so, and this can happen also during the day. For sure, you've had those moments that there are moments that it's like, it's like there are moments that it's not David, and it's like, it's just consciousness. And then there's this moment that it's even nothingness, isn't it? So, okay, because these are happening simultaneously. Yeah? Nothingness, when technology emerges out of it, consciousness emerges out of it, it's not a thing that happens in time. Not like it happened. When did it happen? How did it happen? So that would be the linear way of seeing it, you know? Describe me the steps and you know, that kind of thing. Like if it was the borning of a baby, which does happen in time, it has steps, it has all that, okay? Excellent. So what we're seeing here is this fundamental structure to allow consciousness to do what? To go from it's impersonal to the personal, from the personal to the impersonal, from the impersonal to the personal. So to be able to do this feedback, because once an aspect of consciousness, how can I say, projects itself into, let's say, the color red, it is still connected to white. Yeah, it's still connected to white. So it's like more different levels like that. Good. So that said, what we mainly seeing also is our position as humans on this earth and that. So what we do know is that there are these areas, this feminine, this masculine, and this non-linear or impersonal, and this linear and personal areas, okay? We could say, another way of maybe saying it, if you want, it's like the global brain at the top, the personal brain at the bottom, or mind, let's say, the global mind, the personal mind, and then it has this division in feminine and masculine. Question and answer. You see a question, an answer is more an emitter, and the question receives, you know. I ask a question and I open myself. when I give an answer, I'm emitting. So question and answer is another way of seeing it, yeah, as a way of communication, emitter receiver, question and answer. So at the end of the day, reality is a system of communication for the indivisible to communicate itself through divisions. Yeah, and that has not only how can I say, a physical division, a space division, it also has a division in the sequence time. Okay, and this is something that is pre-organized from the timeless. Yeah, so there is already a kind of an Excel, or there's an Excel which is arranging it in another area, but it's not predetermined. Why? Because how can I say? Well, let's get more into the different areas, and then because the feedback that the person has, the red color has with the white, changes the arrangement that the white does in the next projection. So it's not like determined. Okay, it's more feedback between impersonal and personal. So it's like, let's say, the impersonal can change its mind depending on the feedback of the personal. Okay, it's kind of like that. It's let me put an example. You see in the military, for example. No, or let's take a government. By the way, today it's elections in Argentina. So it's elections in Argentina, in Uruguay, in Colombia, but they local. And well, there's a lot of things moving up to the surface here in South America. So it's interesting, intense. But let's take the government, okay? Well, there is a centralized kind of way of organizing what to do, what not to do, and so on and so forth. But depending on the ministers, is that how you call them? They give feedback to the president. So depending on the feedback, the president can rearrange how it's going to make decisions. So it's not like so determined in the sense that we are like puppets to the abstract. I feel there's a question and answer feedback. Okay, I'll put a couple of examples of that. So you see, the beauty of this is that no matter how complex probably we could get, the structure, the base structure that's sustaining it is very simple. Yeah, so that simplicity is what we must never lose track. You see, like maybe you're going through a very dense jungle, but what you mustn't lose track is where's north, where's south, where's east, because if you don't lose track of that bigger, simple orientation, then you can guide yourself better. Yeah. So we had these here. I put an image also probably to give you an orientation with the calculator in this. Yeah. Because here we have the ma, the pa, mama, which is mother in Spanish, papa, which is father in Spanish, mapa, which is a map, mapa, which is a map, and then you have these what they call cross maps. Yeah? Mapa, mapa. So I'm trying to think from where to take it here. And then we also saw this as a way of putting north, south, east, west. Okay, and that's more seeing it on the earth, because there's something about this type of the feminine calendar, calendaria. It's that it's going to set together space and time. So although we are organizing days, we are linking them with an area of space, but the area of space is an area of consciousness expressed onto space. Okay. So this was clear, yeah, because this is kind of like the essential background. If this is not clear, that's where we're going to have the issues, yeah. So we have this, the south west, the south east. We're using the Spanish, the north east, and the north west. And this is really just the map, the non-linear map, the linear map, the non-linear path. So whenever you are relating with reality, there are four things that are going on. One is your linear consciousness, but your linear consciousness from the feminine aspect and the masculine aspect, okay? See, there's many other ways of seeing. The feminine also is what limits us, what gives us the limitation. And the feminine is more the projection, you see? So I have to see my limits, but I also have to see my projections. You know, like if I'm, for example, if I'm going to start a business, I have to see my limitation, meaning I have to see what resources I have, how much money I have. I have to see where I am placed geographically. I have to see the limitations. But I can't only, if I'm going to start a business, I can't only see where I am. I also have to have this ability of projecting, which is more like this future, okay? Now, that is the area, there's one area where it's in my personal consciousness, but it's very important to also understand that at the same time, this is connected with the impersonal, with the global. So whenever I'm having a conversation, David, with another person, and that is happening, and each of us are using our limitation and our projections, and I'm not seeing projections here as a bad thing. I'm seeing projection as something which occurs, that we always have projections. That's natural. Then we can say that there are projections that are distorted, and that's a projection that has to be self-limited. Exactly. Yeah. So when something is too limited, it needs more projection, and when something is too projected, it needs a self-limit. It needs a self-limitation to it. Yeah. That's why the feminine and the masculine balance each other. Yeah? And also this also happens with political issues. So left wing is going to talk more about distribution. It's focused more on distribution, how we distribute the money. The right is going to talk more about generation. How do you generate things? You see, and an economy needs to have a dialogue between generation and distribution, because if it's just distribution and we think that equality is just about distributing, you know, kind of like a more socialist, okay, yeah, but the important question is, okay, but who's going to generate it? You know, like we need the generators, you know, we need the people who has the projection who can generate the business. And then you're probably going to have the more rights, which is going to be more focused on generation, and it tends to occur is that there tends to be an imbalance in the distribution, you see? Now, the thing is, it's never about left good, right bad, even though we have these associations kind of in our heritage or whatever. Really, life is about how the principles balance each other. How they balance each other and how they increase each other. It's not about, you know, a goodie and a baddie, but well, that's how the political system works, because there has to be positions. You see, that's also, I also understand that at the same time. I understand that it has to be political parties, because there has to be a position that kind of says, okay, I'm going to focus here. Probably the blind point is that what it doesn't know is that it really depends on the right, and the right depends on the left. That's the blind spot, yeah? But sometimes we do it, like, for example, if you have to go to an elections, you have to vote for a political party. You know, there has to be a position that you take. Although you understand that the left and right in its essential aspect, it's a dynamic process. But there's a point that you have to say, okay, I'm going to go with this. My animal says this direction, you know. So, and then we made this relationship with what we call the 4 years. I explained this, yeah, the asume, asimila, desafía, and decide, which is to assume, consume, and assume. Assimilate, yeah, so you assume what you consume, you assimilate it. Once it assimilates, you activate it, and that activation, you take it onto a challenge. And then when the challenge is creating an added value, and then you decide how to integrate it and how to open to the next sequence, yeah? So, this being kind of in order, yeah? This being in order. Now I'm going to put 4 other parameters, which are just another way of expressing these ones, which are very important, or it's going to be very much focused on the human process, because if there's something also about this calendar, it is something that is going to help our human process. Our human process. So there are 4 concepts I'm going to be talking about, which are very much related with these 4 areas of consciousness, okay? And I'm going to talk in 2 groups. The first 2 groups is a concept which is context, and a concept which is logic, okay? Context and logic. And then we're going to see the other 2 later on. Now, if I ask to you guys, you know, what do you understand by context? If I say, like, what comes to your mind when you hear the word context? What do you associate it with? How do you define it? How would you, what does it mean to you in first view, yeah? Context. Context. I'll unmute Sue. There's Sue?
Yeah, have I unmuted? Yeah, it's about how I am responding, living in the environment I'm in. So it's all of the different parameters that are happening now in my life, for example.
You see, there is something interesting. You said, how I am responding to the environment, yeah? Okay.
Yeah.
There, that's basically the way that you are explaining it. It's connecting logic with context. I'll tell. Okay. Context, just by it's separate, what would it be? Okay, so you did say something important, because it's about how I'm responding to the environment. But if I say, okay, but just context, what do you understand just by context?
The elements and the things that are going on.
Going on around you, around.
Yeah.
Around a certain
my
location.
environment. My environment.
Okay. Do you think,
on a personal level, that's context?
Yeah. And do you think context is the same as reality?
No.
It's not the same thing. Okay, now I want to make this difference, this differentiation, yeah? Why would you see a difference? Where would you see the difference between reality and context?
I find it difficult to separate me in the middle of context. So the reality is the way that I am looking at it, seeing through my eyes what is there.
Okay, so
am I explaining myself?
yeah, you're seeing the relationship. Okay, look.
Then you want me to separate that relationship from the context, but I don't think I know how to do that.
Look, I'm just gonna put it this way, yeah? I'm talking about, you know, that external world that's out there, yeah? And I say external from my reference point. We could say that reality is the totality of things that are expressing itself in the consciousness of everything, okay? It's like the big picture, reality. Now, context is where reality is having a direct communication with each individual. That's context. So we have the reality in this kind of big general, yeah. Now, context is where reality is touching each individual. It's where it's directly connecting with me, you know, where the conversation is actually touching my individual aspect. That is my context, also called environment, yeah. Seeing that it's a communication, that reality is communicating with all its individual aspects, yeah, with all its vehicles. Let's put it that way. Reality is having a conversation with all its vehicles, and all the vehicles are having a conversation with reality. Now, context, that's where you are limiting reality to that personal, intimate conversation in your, which is touching your skin, we can say, okay? That would be context, okay? And where is the area where we're going to be placing context? We're going to be placing context. Let me put it in the color. See this one works. No. Here. And I'll explain in a minute why. In Spanish, it's contexto. It's context. I think it's really wrong. No? Now, we can't really say that, like, in this conversation, we're saying, okay, context, it's where reality is touching me, yeah, but from outside. Now, there has to be another element here, which is me, which is participating, yeah? And the way that, because what context is going to be indicating, let's say, is where my limitations are, in a way. Mm-hmm. Where my limitations are. But at the same time, it's also telling me where my potentials are. That's why we put it in the future. The future is allowing us to see where our limitations are, but at the same time, where our potentials are. Now, the logic, it's kind of like that other concept that we're going to be taking into consideration here. It has more to do with how you are reading the context. Okay? And that's where we're going to put it in this kind of here. So there's a context and there's a logic that is relating with that context. When see, I'm trying to find the best way to. When the context is showing me a limitation in me, or we could also say an error, a limitation or an error, let's say for now, I have to be able to see that. Why? Because that limitation is my blind spot. The only way we can, because if we want to increase and expand, we have to do something very simple, but very tricky at the same time, which is our blind spots have to become lucid spots. Now the question is, how does this happen? How can my blind spot become a lucid spot? And that's where context comes. Context is allowing us to, it's allowing us to activate our blind spots. A blind spot is not only something which, how can I say, difficult, it's also our potential. A potential is also a blind spot. Okay. So how can I say, context is the way that reality is directly having a conversation with each me, with each individual, in order for that to be able to become aware of its limitations and of its extensions. Yeah? So these two are going to be very important, mainly in this area here, yeah? The context and the logic. Now, there's going to be other two concepts that we're going to take into consideration on the other side, which is going to be, in Spanish it's called inhumano y humano, which is human and unhuman. Okay. Now, in the configuration of anything that exists, there's always going to be a positive aspect and a negative aspect. In order to change that, we have to take into consideration the negative aspect and the positive aspect. Yeah? Now, in our humanity, we have an aspect which is, how can I say, it's already DNA, it's already kind of like biologized, it's already activated. But there's another area which is negative. And the best example that I tend to use is the analogy of a program, a computer program. So, for example, we're using this app, this computer program, and when we're using it in its positive expression, its manifested expression, yeah? And we're using it that way. But rarely we are allowed to use it in that way because previously it's being configured in another dimension in a more negative area. And that negative area, it's not so colorful, it's not so, how can I say, interactive, it's not so nice. It is much more cold, we could say technical, because it's more a computer coding language. Now, in our humanity, we have the human aspect, which is already the kind of, that which has already been configured in the negative, and it's expressing itself, like this program, which we're using, okay? So if this program, something hadn't been coded previously in the negative, in the computer program previously, that means we won't be able to use it. No matter how much changes we do with the options, no matter how much I change the expressed program, that can't be done in the positive. I have to go to the negative in order for that to be changed. Okay. So we have an expressed aspect as humans, we're going to call it the human aspect. And then we have this other non-expressed aspect, which is the unhuman, okay? We tend to associate unhuman as something very dark, yeah, like unhuman, like very, because the dark, where the dark is written is the same place where the beautiful is written. You know, if you see something in a program and say, oh, it looks very ugly, yeah, well, that which looks very beautiful is configured in the same place, in that negative aspect, in the coding of the program. Okay. So let's put it, and where are we going to put inhuman, unhuman? Is it unhuman or inhuman in English? In Spanish, it's in.
Inhuman.
It's inhuman. Okay, so it's like this. Inhumane, yeah? It's got an E at the end, is that right? And here's going to be the human. Now the human is talking about a generalization, yeah? But this, so on this right aspect, we have the coding, and on this left aspect, we have the more positive aspect, okay? Now, let me kind of give you an analogy for us to see all this, okay? This is where the users, you know, of a program, you have the user, and then you have the programmers, okay? So let's say this is the area of the users, this is the area of the programmers, okay? Now, imagine instead of putting human, let's put Zoom, okay? This app that we're using, Zoom. Now, first, at the bottom in the user area, it's this area here, okay? So the context of using Zoom is going to show me the logic of its coherency and also the logic of its incoherency. So I'm using the Zoom and saying, oh, this is very good. Oh, this is very good. I like this here. Okay, I like that. But there's also going to be things like, for example, there's one thing in Zoom that I don't understand why it's the way it is. That a lot of people tend to have problems activating the sound when they enter into a meeting. Okay. So I would see that and I would say, okay, that is not very consistent. It's not very coherent. But why do I know it? Because the context of using it showed me that inconsistent logic. Okay. Now the question is, how can I change that? I see that it's not consistent. I see other things that are consistent, but that aspect is not consistent. How can I change it? Complaining to the wall? Getting angry? Or I can inform another area, which is not the user area, it's the area of the programmers, and inform them the logical mismatch, the logical inconsistency. So I get in touch with the company or whatever, and I say, look, I've noticed that this works good, this works good, this works good, but this aspect here, that's not working good. But the way that I have to communicate it to that area is logically. Okay, maybe I can get angry, okay, when I'm using it. And it's, that is a legitimate expression. I get angry, I allow the anger, because the anger is actually a sensor for me to know that there's an inconsistency. Now, anger is a sensor, but it's not a reader. Our emotional aspects is a sensor, but it's not a reader. So, when I want to communicate with this area, so that means I want to communicate with this more impersonal area. In that communication, I have to somehow give a more logical view of it. So I have to tell the programmer, I have to say, look, I have to give him a logical description. Because the anger I use, it's not useful for the programmer. It's just not useful. It's not that the anger is not useful. It needs a logical description of the of a logical and not a psychological. So that means when the context is opening something that hurts, we are, of course, we can go through the pain. We can express the pain. The pain is a sensor of our limitation. But the reading mustn't be psychological. I'm saying it mustn't be a, how can I say, the reading of that wound that's been open, for it actually to go to the area to reconfigure it. It mustn't be from our, what's it called this? Autoestima. Self-esteem. You know, your self-esteem, low, high, is not a good way of reading it. So if you're reading it in a very kind of victim way, or you're reading it from like a, that's not useful when you're communicating with this area. The programmer doesn't need your high or low ego. It doesn't need that. It doesn't need your poor victim or whatever. It needs your logical description. That's what it needs. Your logical description of the inconsistency. Okay, thanks. You give me the logical description. Once it receives that logical description, so I'm saying, okay, this doesn't work. The programmer can see that, and here it can reconfigure the code. So this is going to be working with code. It needs to receive a logical orientation, but it's going to reconfigure the code, okay? When it reconfigures the code, it activates from no, it goes on. It's like activating DNA, okay? It's like on. Before it was no, now it's on. But why is it on? Because here I saw the inconsistency. So if I can't see in my personal vehicle an inconsistency and inform it to the non-personal, that the non-personal can't see it. It's like the program, it just can't see a lot of the inconsistency. That's why it tells the user that it has another angle of relationship with the program. Please, if you see any errors, please inform us. Yeah, I don't need your fits. Okay, you can have that with your wall, with yourself. Okay, I don't need your fits. I need your logical description of the inconsistency. Thank you very much. Because the inhuman is like the inhuman aspect of us. It's very cold in the sense that it's not going to understand the kind of it's going to understand very much technically things. It's like a technocrat. Okay, it understands technically things. Okay, it can reorder it, and then that it activates. Now, yes, this would be more like a new frequency in the human. That's where the human has a transformation in its positive aspect. Okay, so that means the coder, the programmer changed the code. As it changed the code, it activated a new version of the program. But now it has to go through the challenge. It has to go through the challenge of, okay, bringing it to the context again, and from the context, us using it again. And again, us doing the same reading. Okay, that was, okay, I like the change. I like the new version. That's very useful. But what about this? I didn't see that the last time. What's happening here? A self-increasing mechanism. It's a self-increasing mechanism. And each of us are part of increasing. And what is self-increasing itself? Consciousness. We're using the human because we want to orient it in the kind of format that we're using. That's why we're putting human. If not, I would put Zoom and in Zoom. Okay. But what we want is a type of conversation which is allowing expansion. Okay. So the first thing that we have to recognize in our living experience that to be able to expand ourselves, we have to read the context, and we have to read how that context is hitting us. If we are not there, we can ask, this is like, you know, thinking that if we're not in the context reading that inconsistency and just you know, the lamp of the genie lamp of Aladdin, that's not going to work. Like, okay, quantum field, I want this to happen, and the quantum field is going to say, I can't do it if you don't tell me your limitation, the inconsistency, because the quantum field is seeing everything at the same time. It's in a different area of consciousness, so it needs your responsible participation, you know. But what happens a lot of times is in this areas, in the personal areas, we are complaining. We are not looking at the limitation in a logical way. Context hits us, we don't like it, and we complain. But we complain in an immature way. We don't participate in the conversation of increasing consciousness. We complain that reality is not how it should be. You see, that's where I see that that's why people are stuck. That's why the people who are complaining, or, you know, very much complainers, you know, complaining, they don't tend to expand. There's an aspect of complaining which is legitimate, okay, which is seeing the inconsistency. But how can I say this? We have to begin to see because in the left, in the personal left, like the past, that's where everyone situates the trauma of the past and all that, okay? Okay, yes, it is there, but the way to how can I say, to reuse that limitation as a potential is to see where is the logical inconsistency of your interpretation or whatever it is, and see that you can rewrite your code in this area. So the user is also participating in rewriting the program. It's not only just a consumer, you see, like I consume it, and no, it's also participating in the sense that because it's using it from a different angle than the programmers, it can see things that the programmers can't see. It's like, because the personal is experiencing things from that angle, it can see things that the impersonal can't see. And of course, the other way around. So more than, because this is how normally we've seen it. The personal says, oh, impersonal, you have everything simultaneously, please give me, you know. And more than asking to the divine and all that, don't ask, have a conversation. Don't ask, have a conversation. Okay, because the impersonal is just another level of yourself that also needs your angle. It also needs your view to be able to re-establish the code. Okay. So I'm not sure if you've been able to see how. So we have to assume. So first consume. Yeah. So we consume the logic. We consume the context. Yeah. We consume the context. And when we consume, we assume where we are. Yeah. Because the context is also showing my limitation. So for example, going to the gym, and the gym using something that's outside of me, like a weight, and that weight is showing me my limitation. You see that? Now, if I respond this way, you know, I see somebody else who did 20 times the up and down, and I can only do it 5, and I start going, oh, I'm so weak and I'm not that good. Well, that way of reading your limitation, oh, I am poor me, I am not as strong as him, and when am I going to be? Or the other way around, which is I do it 20 times, and another person does it 5, and I'm like, haha, you only did it 5. And that's all that way is not a logical way of seeing the limits. It doesn't work. So if you're going to self-pity your limitation, I'm sorry, it's not going to be reading it here. It's not going to change the code. Your self-pity is not a mechanism of conversation, of communication within personal. You know? And I'm very, very, very strong about it, because that's why psychology, and that's why I say don't look at it psychologically, look at it logically. Because a lot of times what I see in psychology, it's this whole pampering the self-pity of the other person. Or, oh, you can do it. You can. The person doesn't need to see that he can or she can do it or not do it. It has to just see, where is my limitation? Where is my reach? It has to see it more logically, the stuff. Okay, I'm not saying this is to become a completely cold bastard. No, okay, when the context hits us in a limitation, that hurts. But what I'm saying, and that hurt and that pain is legitimate, and it must be expressed, and it must be allowed to. I'm not saying that. I'm not saying repression. What I'm saying is that pain, that crying is a sensor. It's not a reader. So if you're reading from your pain, it's not a good reading. The pain is a sensor. The pain in my muscle is saying, stop, it hurts. Behind the pain, there's a logical explanation. What we have to see is be open to the pain. I agree with that. You know, open your wound. Be open, and there's nothing weak about that. Open the wound. Open your vulnerable aspect up to the point that you can. Okay. There's nothing wrong about being vulnerable. Actually, vulnerability is a very important aspect to open to the new potential. It's complete, but please, not self-pity, not self-justification, because that, you know what? Why? Because that is a trap. If your interpretation is from self-pity, from I'm so traumatized because this or that will happen to me, and I do understand that certain limitations are strong, certain limitations are painful. I'm not saying that. I'm the first one who goes through it, but I'm saying the reader must be logical. It must be, and another thing, not ideological readers, please. No, not psychological, not ideological. You know, ideological, I mean like from an you know, like I'm this, that, or that. I'm Marxist, or I'm capitalist, or no, because that is closing your ability to just logically see it, the logic behind it. Yeah. Excuse David, I have a time error. Clock change. Oh right, true. The clock changed. Yeah. Yeah. Don't worry. So okay. Let me use because this is very important with the feminine calendar. Okay, because these are the parameters that we are going to use in the feminine calendar, right? So first, there's a context that I'm going to be open to, okay? And I'm going to consume the context. But really, the calendar starts here. Starts in assuming your position. This is like the mineral area, yeah? So assume where you are, where you're not at. That's where here there has to be a very honest reading. Try a reading which is not overvalued or undervalued. So you're just kind of reading it in a very neutral way as much as possible. Now, again, let me tell this again, because reading it logically doesn't mean castrating the emotions that go through you. No, I'm not saying that. The emotions are very important because they are sensors of the limitations, okay? But what we can't do, like if I'm going to tell, I'm using Zoom and I get very frustrated with something, yeah, and I'm very frustrated, I'm legitimately allowed to go through that frustration because it's real, you know, it's like, okay, actually the frustration is letting me feel the limitation. Now, when I'm going to be writing to the company about what I've seen, frustration is not going to help them, you know. So the program doesn't need my frustration, it needs the reading behind my frustration of the inconsistency. Okay, that yes. So now when I say the programmers, I'm talking about that area here with which our personal is communicating with, okay? Okay. In Spanish, from the right to the left is en. It's in. So it's really a conversation within. Okay. So, and also in human, it's within the human, isn't it? Yeah. So it's something. So where's that programmer? Yeah. It's in. That's going to reconfigure the code. That's going to activate the frequency. That it's like, you know, RNA and activating DNA in a way. Okay. And there, when it's activated here, that's going to kind of see if it's the challenge of bringing it into the context. Okay. The challenge. So that's why I assume the logic of my limitation. Mainly, that's the most important thing to do here in this area, to read the limitation, because to read what's already working well, you know, it's nice, okay, that's working well, but it's not something that is going to increase anything. Yeah? So informing this is the assimilation. It's like the assimilation, and that assimilation, where does it happen? It happens. This is more voluntarily. This is more involuntary. This is more about letting it just to assimilate. This reconfigures the code here. And when it activates, this is the challenge, like the more animal coming down, moving, and putting into action. And then here, the decision of how to integrate all this, and the decision of opening to a new version. Okay, so this is the new version manifests itself because the limitations of the old version were able to communicate in this way. Okay, let me stop and just check. Have you been able to follow it, more or less? Or is there something there that I'm not understanding? Your silence is interpreted as wonderful, perfect, I understood everything, no problems. Susan.
For me, it's good. I'm understanding you.
Brilliant, brilliant, brilliant. Okay, excellent. And this, we can see it in many analogies in life, yeah? Because, you know, when they say like DNA mutated itself, it's like, how did it end? Well, the way that science is that it was an error, but really it's not. It's something that was discovered. Yes? Is somebody speaking? No. So, you know, like this is happening with everything really, yeah? So the context changes its environment, that shows the logical inconsistency, which maybe also it's something that worked very good before and now it's not working, because the update has to be in the present. It's not about how good the program was yesterday. It's about how good the program is today. You have to be in the present. It's like, you know, when we used to be in the water, we had a way of breathing which was very consistent in water. But when the certain animals were coming out of the water to begin to explore the land, well, that had to have a change here. The context was requiring a new reading of a limitation, and that had to be rearranged in the code, in the negative, and activated, okay, in order to adapt. Adapt is just also a way of saying that there is an update which is more consistent with what time space-time is requiring at this moment. Okay, so there has to be an update. It's like that update is also the increasing, you know, of. So why are there updates in nature? Because it's connected with its code and its frequency. You know, everything is connected with the negative and the positive, with the personal and the impersonal. Yeah. So okay, I think the idea was more or less there, yeah. And I'm not sure if you can see also the relationship between assume, assimilate, chat. Now this is where I can see that there can be a confusion here going on. Is that you said, yeah, but the fourth kingdom was the human one. Okay, this is where we mustn't mix the two parameters together, because what I'm talking about here in the human aspect is the activation of a new, let's put DNA for now, okay? It's not, we mustn't mix those two together, because if not, we're going to get confused. That's why I kind of separated the two explanations, yeah? Okay, so this is the assume, assimilate, challenge. Why is it challenge? Because it's the challenge, always the challenge is, what do I bring to the context? Yeah, that's a challenge. Because let's see if you can see the two movements. Context here is changing me. Here I'm changing the context. Feedback. Because it's not about the context is changing me only. It's about me changing the context. So, you know, the whole I change reality, and reality is changing you. So I think it's more than who is the creator. It's more about how does the feedback occur, because everything is creating everything. Okay, so if you think it's just you and your idea of changing reality, it's a very kind of limited way of seeing it, because when reality occurs, that's also transforming you. So, and this is the decision, and the main decision is, how do I integrate what happened? How do I synthesize, you know, what do I learn out of the whole process? And also the decision is, how do I open to a new version? See? A lot of times what happens with us as humans is this. We see the errors of an out of date version. We update it, but then we become in love with the new version that we've discovered. But you see, the new version also has to be let go, because we also have to begin to see that new version also is going to have an inconsistency. What tends to happen is that, because this is more like a creation movement, we fall in love with our creation. But the problem is that we become trapped in it. We become trapped because it's like the artist and the painter and the painting kind of thing, you know? And a very good, I think a person who knows how to grow is a person that knows how to separate itself from its creation and become a user which can self-observate its inconsistency. And that's a very hard movement for a lot of people. That's where you have to realize that you have to become impersonal with your personal creation, you know? You have to, and that's also a decision. It's letting go of that creation. By the way, once you bring that into the context, that belongs to everyone. Yeah, so you can't, it's like this information. You receive it, you process it. Now, once I let go of it and you take it, that is not my, how can I say, I can't control that. that's where humans confuse, you know, because there's an area where you have to become more like the sun. You have to give without wanting to receive, but not because you are a very, very nice person. No, because that's how reality works. There's a moment where when it's emitted outside, I'm taking it from here and I'm bringing it to the context. That is not my property anymore. That becomes everyone's. So everyone's right to want to use it. So after this, you take it and you use it, and you don't have to name the, like, I'm not always naming Alejandra, who is probably the person who has most provided me with the clearest parameters to explain this. Because it doesn't, because once she gives, she lets go. And this, again, is not because of a moral thing. It's because that's how it works. If you wanna grow, whatever you create, you have to let go of it. If you want to grow, you have to do that movement. Because if you bring it, but you are self-guarding it, how can I say this? You're not opening space. That's the decision. It's letting go of that creation. You're not opening the space to see the inconsistency of that also which you've brought into. Okay, so okay, so let's go for a break. Okay, here, just for you to know, this is going to be the main structure of the feminine calendar. All right, this what I've explained here. Also to say that I've explained it in a way that really it's much more than what I've been able to explain. Okay, so what logic is, it's much more than what I've been able to explain. What context is much more than what I've been able to explain. So you also have to leave room for all this for opening the other areas that I haven't put into the explanation. Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm making sense out of that, but I've just tried to give an explanation for you, for the mind to be able to grab the idea. But to grab the idea is very important, but not to limit it to that idea. It's just to grab the concept, but knowing that the concept is much more than what you've been able to grab. It's like, okay, how can I say? Like, you know, if something is tied, imagine there's a big bag, okay? And it's tied at the bottom. In Spanish it's called a piñata, which you put it full of sweeties in it, okay? Now you have to be able to grab the knot, the hilo, the Spanish words are coming into my mind. The string, you have to grab the string, but knowing that where you've grabbed and what's going to be on the other side is much more than what you're grabbing. So I unknot it, and all these sweets come into the ground, you know, meaning there's much more to the story than what you grab. And there's much more to the story of what I've been able to say. Okay, so like, not to close it, because there's more to the story than what I've been able to explain, okay? All right, guys, let's go for a 10-minute break, and we'll continue with this, all right? Good. That election years in United States, the year that the people in North America made the decision of what's going to be the new president which is the year we were mentioning as the decision year. Yeah? It's a year of decision. How we integrate the learning process of the last 4 years and how we open to the next 4 years, okay? And that when the president, and also that United States elections, I sense them as very special, and because it's like each country is going to live two elections, its own and the United States is going to pay attention to two elections normally, yeah? And very much in the general population. And America, I also feel that it's just you see America, which is like in this it's kind of like to see in a synthesis where we are, where we are and where we're moving towards. And it's like plane one. It's like where it is all synthesized, all that construction that happened in the other 8 dimensions, it all synthesizes into this manifested expression. Yeah. So it's like kind of the whole world is seeing where it is. I feel that way. And so where the president actually assumes its position as president, it's on the first year, meaning the year after a leap year is where the president assumes his position. Yeah? So I thought that was very interesting in the way that we were also using these words to express a kind of direction of the organization of these 4 years, yeah, for the humans. So I thought that was really interesting. There's one thing I wanted to share with you guys, which something I heard recently of Alejandra. Sorry, this is not screwing, and I can't really use it until then screw. Ah, there. I think I got it there. Yeah. Oof. No. I'm just going to cover it this way. This is a kind of Argentinian tea, you could say, called mate. Very typical. I just felt like I want one. So there's something that Alejandra has been saying, and I thought it was really interesting. It's using English and Spanish, and it's a concept of what happens when the context is showing a limitation here, but for whatever reason it is that we don't want to see that, we don't want to assume that limitation. We don't want to recognize that limitation or that inconsistency. Yeah? And what happens there is what she calls a black mirror. A black mirror. Probably you've seen this, there's a series called Black Mirror, very interesting, where it's like this projection of what humanity's worst could occur in this technological kind of, you know, this installment of technology in our lives. Yeah? And she kind of says, look, this is what happens. This is how a black mirror occurs, which is projecting a mirror, but we can't see the reflection. Yeah, it's a black mirror. Yeah? So you project it, but you can't see yourself in it. A black mirror. And seeing it in Spanish, let's see if you guys can see it. Yeah, mirror. It's mirror. It's going to separate it here. A mirror is like that, yeah, mirror. But if we put an E here, and E is letter 5, if we put an E here, in Spanish, that you would read it, mi error, mi error. So what it's missing is the E, the 5, which is logic, yeah? And 5 is not only the impersonal consciousness, of course, but also that impersonal consciousness is like the logic of that impersonal consciousness. Yeah? And the thing is, this is kind of what should happen. Like the context is going to express mi error. okay, my error. But my error really is just a limitation, yeah? The thing is, how must I read it? What's the way of reading it? Well, the way of reading it is using an impersonal point of view to look at your personal limitation. That's also why it has logic. It's like using an impersonal aspects within you to look at the limitation of the personal. So if you're able to see mi error with the the impersonal, so looking at in a very neutral and personal way, yeah. I'm not saying castrate, because a lot of people when they hear this, what I found with the process, some of the errors of the process is that the way of taking this was like, okay, that means I mustn't be emotional. I mustn't allow the emotions. That's the way of being neutral is canceling my emotions. It's canceling, and it's like, no. It has nothing to do with that. It's not about repression again, yeah? It's about the way of reading the limitation mustn't be look, the way of going through it must have the warm perspective, meaning, the warm, the feel, the touch, and all that. But the way of reading it must be cold perspective, yeah? So, mi error. What happens if we can't see mi error, so my error, but from an impersonal logical view, that becomes a mirror, a black mirror, yeah? And also the word black, it's very, very similar to another word in Spanish, which is blanquear. Blanquear blanco is white in Spanish, yeah? Blanquear is to show something that was hidden. It's like blanquear, okay? It's to show something which was hidden. So to see this, instead of a black mirror, we can do blanquear mi error, okay? So it's to see, to reveal, or to unhide my error. But when you're seeing my error, you are looking at it from an impersonal viewpoint, yeah? That's why it has logic in this area, this area is also much about me. This is more about tú, you, context, yeah? Tú, me. We'll see that, the tú, me. So, mi error. Yeah, okay. So can you grab this way of seeing it? This playing with words, the blanquear mi error, and then you won't have a black mirror, a black mirror. Because when you're able to see it, you're able to recode it. Sorry, when you're able to see it, do an impersonal reading of it, then you can recode it, activate the frequency, and then do the challenge of bringing it into context, yeah? Good. Excellent. So, yeah. Now it's when we're going to get more into the actual calendar, yeah? And it's, you see, this is also a fractal. I'm just going to take a photo of this because I want to show it in another way. Okay, just to show you that the connection is like an 8. There's an 8 occurring here. Yeah? So the context will receive it, and there's an 8. So each is receiving and emitting. Can you see that? Here we receive. Here we emit a logic. Here it receives that logic, and it emits a new code. Here it receives a new code. It activates a frequency, and it emits it down into the context. So there's an emitting and receiving of each of these areas. Yeah. Just going to show this because now what we're going to do is order a year, 365 days, into, well, really, in dividing it into the feminine calendar and what we call the Ring of Fire. Okay, it's a division of the year into these two sequences. This also has to do with space. Okay, with the two areas of the space of the surface of planets, planet Earth. Okay, and the way that it's divided is, it's like each of this is going to be a week, and a month is when it goes through all of it. Okay. So 4 days for this, 4 days for this, 4 days for this, 4 days for this, and then we go into the second month. Okay, it's like weeks of 4 making up months of 16. All right, that's the organization of the feminine calendar, which is 4 times 4. It's a 4 times 4 process. Yeah, you see that the cars, the 4x4 they call it, the 4x4 cars. They say it's, in Spanish say it's todo terreno, which is like it can go through all lands. You know, the 4x4 cars, it can go through all lands. Well, the 4x4 is like, okay, we can touch all the lands, all the types of areas which constitute who we are. Yeah. But it's going to be 4 days here, 4 days here, 4 days here, and 4 days here. Meaning, there's 4 days to assume the logic of my position, which the context is going to express me. 4 days for this. Okay. And in those 4 days, what am I doing? I'm assuming my logic. I'm assimilating my logic. I'm challenging that logic, meaning that is more the emitting. The last 2 are more emitters, the first 2 are receivers. So I assume, I assimilate, I challenge means, what's the challenging? It means I'm not just gonna stay with the program like this forever. I can see the inconsistency, so I'm gonna challenge it. How do I challenge it? I decide to transfer to this area. A lot of people don't even know that this area exists or they connected to this area. So they just kind of try to solve it personally. See? Bloquear means to whiten, yeah. Whiten. Does that expression also exist in English? To whiten something? All right, I didn't know that. Okay, to whiten. So it's to whiten your area, yeah? And if it doesn't happen, it's black mirror. Yeah? So, what was I saying there? Yeah, so each of these are going to have a receiving and an emitting. It's kind of like the 2 days is more about receiving it, and the last 2 days is more about emitting it to the other one, yeah? So I assume, I assimilate, I challenge it, yeah? And I make the decision to derivate it. Here, in human. This happens more in involuntary areas, okay? What do we need in the personal is just allow this to occur. It's like the digestion of after you eat. What's the best thing you can do? What's the best thing you can do after you eat to help your digestion? You can't control the digestion, but you can relax and understand that you're in that period where you feel tired, where the blood is more concentrated to do this, and you just allow that to happen. That's the best. So once you derivate it here, it's just allowing, kind of. Allowing, but at the same time, you're conscious of what your body is doing. So you are conscious of what the impersonal is doing also, okay? So here it assumes that inconsistency or that limitation or that out of date version or aspect of the version. It assumes it challenges, okay, I'm gonna activate a new code, and then it decides to transfer it here, activate it here. Here it assumes, it assimilates, challenges, the challenges that, and it decides to do this. The context assumes, assimilates, so that means the context receives that also, assumes, assimilates, challenges it again, and emits it here. Can you see this? These 4 moments within each quadrant, yeah? because really this is a fractal. So that means within these, we're going to have 4 like this. Can you see? So that would be like day 1 within this quadrant, day 2, day 3, day 4. Can you see? Within each day, because this is day 1, let's say day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, okay? Within each day, it is also divided into 4. It's like the 24 hours, it's divided into sections of 6 hours. That's why the first moments of the day you assume, it's kind of you wake, the first 6 hours, like you assume where you are, then you begin to assimilate the day, and then you challenge. It's like the challenge is a movement aspect. It's that moment of the day that you say, okay, I move. And then at the end of the day, you decide. So you decide what, you go to bed, you sleep, and you make the decision of derivating, okay? So it's like, it's the same organization, okay? So soon, there's something, remember you said, does it matter what hour, like when I'm born? Yes, because of this. So what time of the day you're born is also important, yeah? So that's also something to take into consideration. So if you're born in the first 6 hours, the next 6 hours, and so on. Good. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Here it's going to go 5, 5th day, 6th day, 7, 8. Okay. 9, 10, 11, 12. And 13, 14, 15, 16. So we have 16 days, okay? 16 days organized in one lap, okay, in that year. So we have months of 16 days, which are divided in weeks of 4 days. I'm saying weeks just a way of organizing it, yeah? Which is taking this process into consideration. What we're going to end up having is 22 months in the year, okay? 22 months of 16 days. The thing is, this is going to leave us with, this is going to end in the day 352. This is like the last day of the 26th lap, okay? Now the question is, what about the last 13 days that are left? Now these last 13 days is what we are going to call the Ring of Fire, which is like the future of the year. Yeah. And these 22, actually, we are going to divide it into 2 moments. One moment of 11 laps and another of another 11 laps. And this is going to give us 3 different moments in the year, 3 different aspects of the year. Yeah? 11, what does 11 mean also? 11 is you've completely seen it from the beginning to the end. That's 11, okay? You've seen it from the beginning to the end. In the manifested plane. So what are the first 11 laps or months, taking this feminine calendar, about? It's more about allowing the year to form itself. Yeah, so it's more a formation period. The second is not so much about the formation of the new year. Remember what a year is, yeah? It's a new potential within a period. It's not only about the formation of it. The next 11, it's more about the development of it. And what is these last 13 days? The integration and disintegration. Yeah. The integration and disintegration. The integration of this year, but like the ending is a beginning, because when you end something, you end it in the most matured, integrated aspect, or it should be at least. But at the same time, you have to disintegrate it. That's why also the Ring of Fire, it's like you have to, in Spanish, it's fundir para refundar. What does that mean? Fundir is to melt. You have to melt it. To refundar is to refound it. So there's a kind of paradox, and at the end is that it's where the maximum integration of that version occurs, but also the decision of opening to the disintegration of it. So the formation, you see these are three basic growing aspects. Something forms itself like a baby, then it has a development period, and then it has an integration period. No? So the beginning of any process tends to be the formation. It's like it's coming together, yeah, kind of thing. The second stage tends to be, okay, now that it's together, let's develop it. You know, let's make it grow. And then the last is, okay, now that we've seen its formation, its development, now let's do the integration of it. Yeah. And the integration is where it should reach its maximum potential, like its maximum maturity. Now, the maximum maturity of a fruit, it's where it starts rotting. Okay, that's kind of the paradox. So its maximum maturity is where also you must be careful, because you're very close to start rotting if you don't open to a renewal. Yeah. So if you're not opening to a renewal, something begins to rotten, and it's very difficult to see, because it's like, wow, I'm at my highest moment. Yeah, that's why it's so dangerous. It's sweet, very sweet that moment, yeah, but when it rots, very, very quickly, it's not that sweet, that fruit. So why does life do this? Like, was it a punishment or something? No, it's a growing mechanism, because it's something that allows us not to get too comfortable in one version. Because what space-time, it's axiomatic, one of its axiomatic principle is it always has to grow. It has to increase its coherency. It's like it's something that you cannot, it's like you have to obey that law, or you could say it's one of its laws, okay? It's one of its axioms. And of course, there are moments where you have to, it's not like, for example, capitalism understands this, but it doesn't understand that the best growing is slow. So it's like producing. New version. Okay, good, all good with the growing. Okay, but it has to go in an organic process, because if not, you burn out very quickly things. So it has to balance with something else, which is the slow process. So there has to be that equilibrium occurring, something that that is growing, meaning increasing the level of coherency of consciousness of within yourself first. You notice that something is increasing its level of coherency, but also having respect to not try to go too quick in this. Just knowing that there's a biorhythm for each of us, which is connected to the biorhythm of the center of the earth, and it's distributing different speeds, and you have to just find your own rhythm, not to go too fast, not to go too slow. And how do you balance it? How do you do when you go too fast and when you go too slow? Because when you go too fast, you start noticing the consequences. You start noticing the context start to show you the logic that you're going too fast. Okay, got it. Okay. But a lot of times you're going too fast, but it's unconscious. You don't know. You just know when you know the way that you discover a limit. It's when you go over the limit. That's the only real way of finding a limit. It's going over. Now we have to be intelligent. You know, it's like, okay, but we have to become more mature. You know, like the best way of knowing how one educates itself on feeding, on food, for example, is that you know that, okay, I don't feel good. Why? Because I ate too much. Okay, but now I have to learn from that. You know, I can't be going over the limit all the time. I have to. This is what's another axiom of space-time, is that it has to decrease the margin of error. You have to begin to decrease the margin of error. Because if you're not doing that, it means you're not learning. You know, like if I'm always, you know, maybe I need a few lessons to integrate it, you know, okay, all good, but I can't be repeating the same error all the time. And whenever there's a repetition, that's when a process of degradation occurs. So there also has to be, you know, a margin of error must become shorter. And also, the more mature we are, the more responsible we have to become also with our process. More responsive. It's more about, not so much about always transferring, it's about assuming and becoming responsible, but up to the limit that you can, yeah? Good. Is this understood? These 3 moments in the year? Yeah, so it's 11 cycles of 16, another 11 cycles of 16, which end with 22. We call it todos los circuitos. It's like all the circuits. So you got all the circuits. You know, in technology, you got all the circuits. Now we need the integration of all those circuits. So this is another way of having a relationship with the time of the year. It's, how can I say it? It's like seeing that the middle of the year, the beginning of the year, and the ending of the year are different moments of that year. And I'm not sure if you guys noticed that there are these cycles occurring within the year that are not only due to seasonal things. There are these cycles of consciousness occurring. And I'm not sure if you've intuitively tapped into that. Yeah? And not to say that this is just a way of self-observing a process to integrating a process. Yeah? That it's just this is not important. This is a strategy. Okay? The important thing at the end of the day is basically how that strategy is helping you to self-increase your awareness. So again, this is not the important. This is a strategy. Yeah? We have to differentiate. Yes, Jeff.
David, yeah, I'm not understanding the 11s, the formation and development and
okay,
you know, how the math works there.
It's 22 cycles of 16 days.
Which, okay.
Which is 352.
Okay.
352
22 cycles. Okay.
2 days to go from here to here.
16.
And then,
okay.
And then you have the last 13 days. Sorry, you have the last 13 days. Sorry. You have the last 13 days to do the integration here. And if you sum them together, 365, yeah?
Okay. All right.
Now you're gonna say, okay, what about that extra day, yeah? Now there's something important about that extra day. Actually, what's happening is that each year is having what we call a 0.25 margin of error. A 0.25 margin of error. Now, this is the key. Are you able to have the circuits Have you heard about the photogram 25? The photogram 25, apparently, like if you're watching a movie or something, you can visually see 24 photograms. I think it's per second. 24 photographs. The 25th, you can't see it. It's a blind spot. The thing is, what we're trying to see is for the year to allow us to see our blind spots, like the 25th photogram. It's like if it's hidden behind all the days, it's the margin of error that if we are seeing it, like, yeah. And I'm not sure, well, at least my grandmother from Spain used to say, leap years make you or break you. Make you or break you. Leap years make you or break you, yeah? Well, she said it in Spanish, but I'm going to put the English version. Make you or break you. And it's like, okay, you know. But now it's like interesting because when does it make you? When you participated consciously and the 25 became conscious. So you saw, it's in Spanish is the circuito lógico, the logical circuit. So when you're able to see the logical circuit, it makes you. But if you don't see it, it breaks you. It means it's this opportunity of becoming conscious of the unconscious. But there has to be a bit of a will to do that, you know, to open to that. So there is something kind of saying, do you want to participate consciously in this? Or you just want to be here on vacation, you know? And you see, there's this view that life, we are here to enjoy life. And I think that's a very limited, like enjoy, like I'm here to consume life. Are we here to just enjoy? Which I'm not saying that we're not. I'm saying, or are we also here to be part, are we also here to participate in the rewriting of life? You see, because if you enjoy, you're just consuming. You know, I'm enjoying my holiday, and all the people who are the pilots that are taking me on the plane, and the people in the hotel that designed the hotel are all there for me to enjoy life. I'm here to enjoy. Are you here to enjoy, or are you here? Okay, yes, enjoy is part of it, I'm saying, but I don't think enjoying life is the whole purpose of it. I think we are also here to participate in the rewriting. We are generators, not just consumers of life, you see? So when they say life is a gift, life is a gift, I say, no. Life is a credit. I see it it's a credit. It means Earth is giving you a credit. Space-time is giving you a credit called life, which has a certain amount of money, a certain amount of, what are you going to do with that credit? Because it's not a gift. Life is not a gift. If you're not providing extra value, life takes you away. So if you are providing extra value, life renews your credit, because life is not a gift. The banker is life, nothingness. But it's not a stupid banker. It's not just giving you money for you to spend it. No, it's like there's a purpose there's a purpose for you to exist, and it's to add extra value to the consciousness of reality. So these phrases that seem so innocent, you know, you're here to enjoy life, and then life is a gift. It's like, if you really look close to them, it's terrible. You're here to enjoy life. So life is here to serve you, for you to enjoy yourself. Yeah? Because you're a consumer of life, you're not participating in the generation of it. Mm-hmm. And then it's the other one, life's a gift. It's a gift. There you go. You see, the thing is that when you have a gift, you don't give anything back to the person. But if you have a credit, you do have to prove what you're doing with that credit. Now, let's say that nothingness, the good thing, that doesn't speculate, okay? That's a good thing about this banker. It's probably the only banker that doesn't speculate with this credit, yeah? But I feel that a lot of people get old and get ill and so on because, not all the cases, yeah, but I think there's a lot of cases that you see that some people get old and they get into this beautiful moments of wisdom and maturity. And then you get these other old people where they enter into this very kind of complaining, annoying people. And it's like, okay, what happened there? How did one use the credit and how did the other one use the credit? You see? And that's where I see there is a maturity or there's a degradation. Yeah. And normally the people that you see them old, but they spark, they're still there, they still very much, there's an example for me that I have in mind. It's the president of Uruguay, the old ex-president of Uruguay. Independently of his ideology, yeah? But the man in itself, you know, he's very old, he's pretty old, but he talks and he's bright. He's got this, you know, he's got the spark. It's like he's still got the vitality. It's like he's still got renewed his credit kind of thing. And like, okay, this guy must have done something right, you know? And he was a guy that was, because he was a guerrilla war, and he was taken into jail, and he, like, it was probably 13 years in jail in conditions that you can't imagine, like very, very compartmentalized. He couldn't speak with anyone. Okay, so, and he sparks at the end of the day. What happened there? Shouldn't he be complaining how terrible things were? And now you see him with young people and he sparks. What happened there? He used his credit, okay? And it was renewed. Probably he's gonna die, yeah, okay. I don't think we've reached that moment of integrity yet, and I don't think we're gonna reach it. But I believe that death is because we haven't got enough integrity to renew the credit. I don't think it's only a biological thing. I think it has to do with consciousness also. But I think that's very far away for us as humans as well. It's a projection. But I don't think death has to be, I'm not sure. I think there's this opportunity of renewal. Yeah, but I think we're trying to do it only biologically. And I think the key is that life says, okay, you got the integrity, and I'm going to renew your credit. You know? So yeah, I wouldn't say life is a gift, and I wouldn't say that we're just here to enjoy life. Yeah. Okay, so the 0.25 is what we're seeing. The 0.25 in the first year, in the second year, that is 0.50. In the third year, 0.75, and then the fourth year, it's the integration of that. Yeah, the one. The whole thing you sold the year. That's going to be put as an extra day here, but really the way that we're going to take in the feminine calendar, it's actually a day out of time, really. It's like a kind of day out of time. It's like, what are you doing each day is that day. You understand? So that 0.25 is there. Look, in the way that it's been explained, I think it's a bit confusing, which is, okay, so here you got the logic as the, so you have the first day, the second day, the third day, and the fourth. The way that I prefer to see it, I think it's more clear, is the first day I assume the logical position of my limitation, yeah? Then I assimilate it because, okay, I assume where I am, now I have to assimilate where I am. I challenge it, and I decide to transfer it. Okay, that way of seeing it, it makes more, but the way that it's explained is logic, and in this one, it's like logic, to see the logic of the logic, and then to see the logic of the inhuman. Okay, you can use it that way, it is valid that way, but for me at least, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't work. It just becomes very like logical. I can't relate with it. But I do see that it works when I'm seeing these 3 steps of each quadrant. Yeah, that for me to see the whole full limitation of my position, and so I have to assume it, I have to simulate it, I have to open to the challenge. What is opening to the challenge in that aspect? It's to see your limitation is not to, how can I say, to think that you're there forever kind of thing. You know, if you see a limitation, that's when you can challenge it. Yeah. So to see the limitation is not to kind of say, okay, well, that's me kind of thing, you know, that's a challenge movement. That's life needs not only seeing limits, but to challenge the limits. Yeah. But it's very stupid to challenge a limit that you can't see. Yeah, that's sometimes kind of young people do that. You know, they challenge things, but they don't know. It's like they challenge the rule, but they don't even know the rule. It's like they challenge the law, but they don't know the law. It's like, first, understand what you're challenging. First, you know, see where the limit is. Because if not, there you become this kind of challenger without reason. What do they call it? There's a movie, I think, of James Dean called I can't remember now. Okay, so that's something, yeah, to see that. And then but I leave it to your criteria, yeah. So if you also want to see within this logic, you can also call it logic of the inhumane. It does have that connection. It does have that connection, and maybe just have it in the background, but it ends up being confusing, at least to me. So I can't explain something that's confusing to me, you know. Is it the devil's advocate? Devil's advocate.
Yeah, I don't know if that's the name of a movie, but that's the idea, is that someone who's always challenging. So if you take a position, they'll challenge it. Then you'll take the opposite position, they'll challenge that.
Yeah.
Oh,
What's that?
Is the James Dean movie called Rebel Without a Cause?
Yeah, Rebel Without a Cause. That's the one.
Yeah.
Rebel Without a Cause. Rebel Without
Yeah.
a Cause. Yeah, well, the devil's advocate kind of thing, you know, it's like this. You see that's where the challenge. See, each of these, to assume, to assimilate, to challenge, and to decide, they all have a function and a dysfunction. Okay, because to assume where you are, it mustn't be to just stay there. To assimilate, you can't be always assimilating. You know, like these people, it's like it seems like the whole life I'm assimilating it. Okay, there's one at some point you can't just assimilate it all the time, yeah. And then the challenge, but the challenge, you see where the challenge comes. I've already assumed the limitation. I've assimilated it. Now I can challenge it. But if you challenging just because you like to challenge, and then the decision, yeah, that decision, but you can't be always in that point of, because the decision point, it's this very much paradox, you know. So it's like you are very, very, very at the end of the old, and you're very, very close to the new. You know, you like they're at the end at one point, and you're very close to the next point. Good. So here it would be the inhuman. Just going to put it in the Spanish. Yeah? and the context. Contexto. So if you want your life to become an increasing and not a black mirror, okay, this is probably a very good way of seeing. It's a very, now can you see it's kind of sophisticated. It's a very sophisticated looking at it, you know. But at the background is very simple. It's not complex. It's how these areas communicate with themselves and how you participating in that communication, yeah? How you participate in that communication. And it kind of goes like this. This is the first day. So it's kind of receiving, let's say the first day of the year is here. So what is the context that you're receiving? Yeah? It is basically you're receiving like the last day of that previous year, and you're assuming that position. Yeah? So this and this is going to receive here, emit here. So let's say it's receiving here, emitting here, receiving here, emitting here, receiving here. I'm just doing the aids for you to see. Yeah? It's receiving here, and it's emitting here. And what you have is a conversation between the non-lineal, the lineal, the personal, the impersonal, between the feminine and the masculine, between the question and the answer, between the past and the future. Here we can talk about past and future. Up here, it's not a very good parameter to talk about past and future. It's better to talk about question and answer, really, you know, because it's not so much about that way of sequencing things. Yeah. Good. Let me see.
David,
Yeah.
can I interrupt a moment? Can I go back to the Black Mirror? There's perhaps something I haven't understood there. You were talking about blanquear. Were you suggesting, oh, my understanding of whiten is it's something you cover up. Is that what you were saying?
No.
Because I thought you were saying the opposite. But blanquear translated into English is to whiten. So if you whiten a wall, you're covering up what's underneath.
Oh, no. Blanquear is completely the opposite. Blanquear,
except that in the dictionary it says whiten. I looked it up now, so that's my confusion.
Yeah, well, the way that I've used the practical in my life, right? To blanquear, it's like, especially it's used in economy. You know what they call to blanquear is to in economy is that economy that is being hidden for it to become socially seen. Okay, that's blanquear. Also, you can also use it in the way that you're money laundering. Yeah, but
money laundering. Yeah,
that's a different story. So let me explain what I mean. It's black. Okay, black. You can't see, but blanquear is the opposite. It's actually to bring something to light, something which is in the dark, to bring it up to light. Okay. And so the idea is, if you can, within your awareness, you can bring up to the surface, to the visible, blanquear. Mi error, my error. But when you say mi error, you are just seeing your, very impersonally, you are reading a limitation. You see, for example, you know who are very good, who tend to be very good sports people who progress? They are people that are able to be very honest and respectful with their limitation. It's like they can see their limitation very clear. Because this is what they can do. They can see the limitation, but they don't take it personal. They see it impersonal. And then when they see it impersonal, something allows them to do this kind of exchange here. And so they have a very clear reading of their, because whenever we talk about a limitation, we're also talking about an extension. So each of us has an extension, so a reach, but also we have a limitation. When you're able to see your limits, you can exploit your reach. You can make functional your reach. But a person who is how can you say it? Lying to themselves, you know? It's like, no. That, even if they have a lot of potential, like for example, this happened to Mike Tyson, or of course, he had very big potential, natural potential, but he was someone that wasn't very good at seeing his limits. He was, you know, whenever he was going to see his limits, like, no. And kind of he started to decrease when he was at the top because he didn't have this ability of seeing impersonally his limitation, okay? Now, taking that out of the context of competition and sports and just putting it into the context of awareness, it's the same mechanism. So, you know, a lot of, this is something I see about spirituality a lot. Spirituality has this thing of, they think it's more important the transcendence of their limitation than the self-awareness of their limitation. So they're always trying to transcend and, you know, transcend the ego and the limitation. But a lot of times, you see, this is something that I think is very important, is that you are like a radio that is communicating with the whole of space-time, yeah? And space-time has different radio stations. Now, what's very important for the radio to be able to receive a certain signal, whatever it's tuning into. So the tuning, what's it tuning into? It's your derivation. It's like with which radio station you're connecting, yeah? That's the tuning into. You know, are you tuning into angels and devils, and are you tuning into that story? Or are you tuning into something that has integrity, you know? Something which has the integrity of being an original source. Or you tuning into masters and all that story. Where are you tuning into? Yeah, that's your derivation, and it's very important, the tuning. Now, there's something also very important about a radio. It has to know its location. It has to know where it is, where its limitation is, because it could be tuning into, you know, the most open radio station in the world, but if it doesn't know where it is, it can't really receive it and you know, put it into its vehicle and express it. And I noticed that there's a lot of self-deception in a lot of spiritual movements, because they never want to just see their limitation. They always want to transcend it. And it's like, isn't limitation a very important technology of consciousness? Like, why did it create limitation? Like, is it a punishment? Why do we have this allergy to limitation? You know, why is it? Why is it it's always this transcend the ego kind of blah, blah, blah thing? Because ego, in the sense that it's just limits, it's just your limitations, just a format, and if you don't know where your limits are, you are not a very good position radio. So that's where I've noticed that kind of that story going on thing. I know also they mean the ego in the sense of the false kind of identity, you know, the false reading of identity kind of thing. I know, but there's this phobia with the limits, phobia with the limitations. Like, why is that part of a problem, you know? Why is that part of a problem? I think one of it is because we've been very disconnected with the limited. So it's like, you know, when you haven't had, I'm not sure, just imagine you've been in a country, there's no fruit, you know, and you've been disconnected to eating fruits, you know, or something. And then suddenly you are able to travel to Ecuador or something, one of these Caribbean countries, and there's full of fruits, and you're like, oh, I just want to eat fruits. I just want to eat fruits. I understand that. It's a compensation movement. Yeah, it's like because you've been disconnected with that relationship, there's a moment that it's the only thing you think that's important. Now, but after a while, you're like, okay, I've eaten fruits for years, and I think you're going to kind of want to balance it again with other things, you know. And I think a maturity comes when we see that it's not like the illimited is the goody-goody and the limited is the baddie-baddie. It's just two areas of conversation of consciousness. It's like, it's not about, you see, it's not about choosing a side. It's more about I think the mature question is not how can I go from the limited to the limited. I think the question is how can I communicate? How can I establish the communication, the feedback between both of them? Between that which has limitation and that which doesn't have limitation. Like how does the technology of communication work? And I think that's more a mature, more than transcend and, you know, being in the limited, and because I think there's a trauma there. In that way of I think there's a non-solved trauma. They just want to go. It's like if they don't really want to be in this opportunity called self-limitation for the focusing of an angle of consciousness, you know. And probably it's because there is this relationship that this is not good. You know, like the Christian kind of, you know, we hear because we messed up and we screwed up. It's like this is shit. You know, like that translation thing, you know, like this world of limitations, it's crap. And that's not a logical way of seeing it. I think that is a traumatic way of seeing it. That's where we have to be able to see the difference between when the context is opening my trauma and to be able to go through that, but to be able to connect with a logical and personal point of view. Because if you just see it from the trauma, you're going to be stuck there for the rest of your days. If you're going to open your wound and see it from that which caused the wound, you're not gonna, it's like if you're gonna, because there's something, I think there's a lot of integrity on when you see this person that is able to open to the vulnerability. There's something very, you know, something that I think causes a natural admiration, you know, when someone can open its vulnerability. Now, when somebody becomes self-pity, there's something that, oh, I don't like that. Why is it? Because they're doing the same thing. Is that I tend to see that the people that open their vulnerability, or the one that cause admiration and not rejection, because they're opening it to, in a way, trying to see it from a different angle. You know, it's painful. Yes, it's painful. Yes. I know it's painful. It's not nice. Yes, I know it's not nice. But I'm opening because the vulnerability is actually where how can I say? See, when you touch your limits, you're touching your vulnerability. So when the context opens a vulnerability, it's exposing a limit. When I'm able to be honest and go through the natural, you know, uncomfort of that, but I can open to the logical reading, that's where I can see that somebody who opens their vulnerability and grows, then self-pity never grows. They always with the same story, they always with the same issue, they always the same thing. Not only the same thing, the same consciousness of the same thing. Because if they stuck with the story, it doesn't matter. Are you increasing your consciousness? Good, use that same story all your life if you want, but use it for increasing your consciousness, you know? So there's something that really creates a rejection there. And why does it create a rejection? Because it's a trap. And it's like when you smelling, like your animal smells food that's not good, and it's like, ugh, it's because that's going to make you sick. That's why when we see these self-pity, this attitude, it creates a bit of rejection, because that's going to make, if we use that mechanism, we're going to be stuck in our trauma for the end of days. Yeah, we're going to be stuck in our wound for the end of days. So yes, you're showing your vulnerability, but you're not showing your vulnerability. You know, you're justifying it, you're defining yourself from it, and all this, you know. Good. Okay, I think another break would be good here. So just to situate this would be like 1st of January, 2nd of January, 3rd of January, 4th of January, yeah, 5th of January, 6th, so on. Yeah, that's kind of the year starts here. So the first moment of the year is more about, like the first day is about assuming your limits, like where you are. Instead of wishing where you want to be, you see everybody is like, I want to be that, and like, and it never happens. It never happens what I wish, because better don't wish anything. Just kind of assume where you are. Assume your limitation. Yeah. And so I assume my limitation. I challenge it, meaning I see the department which can rearrange it. So I do the derivation there. This assumes that the logical coordinates of that limitation. It assimilates that. It challenges it. It recodes it, and it makes the decision of going from code to frequency. This assumes the new frequency, assimilates the new frequency, the challenge of putting the frequency, like the challenge of bringing the frequency down, like into life. And that's from the challenge to the decision. This assumes that new manifestation, a new creation, it assimilates it. It challenges it. And then it decides to open to, you know, the challenge of receiving the new version in the context is letting go of it. That's the letting go that I talked about, yeah. And this is the dynamic of the year. So the year is connecting with a self-increasing dynamic, and you can just kind of follow it in that way. Whenever you want to see the day, you know, like it doesn't have to be this, but it's a very, how can I say, it's a very good training, you can say, training in a way. So now let's go for a little break, and then we come back, and I'm just going to talk about how the organization of the Ring of Fire occurred. Because see, really what is happening here is this. In the day one of the year, we could also say it's minus 364. So on the first day of the year, with which day is this conversating? With the end of the year. In negative, it's conversating with the 365. That's where we have to see is that the year is being moved from the future. Yeah? We are moving, but the year, the orientation of the year comes from the future. So we're connecting, these first 13 days are connecting with these last 13 days. So don't see 13 as a bad luck number. It's a good luck number. It's a new perception. So let's come back in 10 minutes and let's look at this last part, which won't take long, yeah? This last part of the Ring of Fire. Any questions? Anything you'd like to look into? No. Good. Excellent. So let's go for a break, okay? Now let's go with the last part, this part of the Ring of Fire. And well, first of all, let's explain the reason of the name, yeah? Hopefully, let's see if you can see this. Can you guys see this? It's like the Earth. Yes? Can you see that it's moving? Or is it just...
Yes, we see it. It's moving.
Yes, it's moving.
Okay, excellent. Because those are going to help us. Let me see if I can move this. Okay. Can we hide this? No. Okay. Okay. Look, there's like two very distinguished areas of our planet, yeah? Where the continents are, okay? Where the land is, you could say. Of course, there is this part of the ocean, and this big ocean that separates us. But there's this very distinguished area which is mainly water, yeah, which is here. Okay, this area has been named. The name that has been given to this area is Ring of Fire. Well, the main reason is because it has these tectonic plates that are very, very unstable, very, very dynamic, we could say. And all the areas that it touches, like in the west coast of America, the west coast of Mexico, all that area is touching that tectonic plate, and that's where there tends to be the biggest earthquakes. Yeah, that's why it's called Ring of Fire. Also, we have the song of what's his name, the one that Jeff provided us, who channeled this Ring of Fire of the earth. Okay, now I just because there are two areas, so there's areas that are mainly water and another area where there's more land. The water area, this is space, we're talking about space here. The water area is more capturing, as water does, let's say the future, or let's say the emission of the sun, okay? So that's where it's more capturing here. And that, once it is processed in the central consciousness of Earth, okay, it becomes expressed on the land. So it's kind of like the future, and the land express the development of that, like the non-lineal and the lineal, okay? Now, like this feminine calendar is connecting space and time in relationship with the earth, what is going to be called the Ring of Fire is the last 13 days, so the future of the year. Okay? Now, I think I've got another image here of the Ring of Fire, which shows the limits with the continents. See, English, workshop information, instructions, images, and I think this is the clearest one here. Stop. Can you see that? It says Pacific Ring of Fire, or you can't see that? No. Okay, stop share. Can you see it now? Okay, that would be where the Ring of Fire is touching the continents area, yeah? And that's where there are mainly the biggest earthquakes because of that tectonic movement, yeah. So I'll pass you that image lately, after. So basically, we have the non-linear and the linear in space, and now we're going to see it in time. So we've distributed the year in the sequence of 4. And the ring of fire, I'm going to put this, which is more linear, but actually the ring of fire, the way that it's represented is a circle. And the way that, and I'm just going to put these to facilitate the view. Yeah. So you have the center here, and then you have this. Yeah. The way that it's ordered these days, yeah, which is the future of the year, which is the integration from the future. Okay, so it's like you capture from the future, but then you see the development from the present to that moment of the future. Yeah. But remember always, the future is the one that's moving the past and the present. So rarely the present is moving because the future is moving it. Yeah, it's like the fruit. The example I put is the fruit is what's orienting the growth of the root, from the fruit to the root. Yeah? Well, it's the same thing. The fruit doesn't exist, but it is operating in another dimension, in another time from the future. But it is definitely present in the direction that the plant is taking. Yeah? Good. So remember that we finished in the 352nd day of the year. So when is this future ring of fire in time going to start? In the 353rd day of the year. This is a very interesting number, because what is it? It's the communication of the linear mind with the non-linear mind. Okay, that number is going to be in the center. Yeah. Okay. Really, it's like this. This is how it's represented because it's non-linear. So let's just do it that way. But there's going to be the quadrants, you know, the same structure. 3, 5, 3. Now this center, this number, I'm not sure. It says so many things to me, yeah, because it's like 3 is brain consciousness, and when you have brain consciousness, you have a linear, you have like a linear process from 3 to 3. You know, it's like a linear, and that linear brain is ending the year, and it's communicating with this brainless consciousness. In this case, the consciousness of the earth, 5. And the 3 is each of our little brains. Also, the tu me, which is something that emerges from this ring of fire, which is that is a bit more complex to explain. It's the mechanism of how the global brain of the earth is configuring the time developments of the individual brain, the global mind with the individual mind. Okay, but it's this 3, 3, 5. See, it's non-linear, and this has, and 3 is linear, so fast in the future. Very, very strategic day. And how it's going to go? It's going to go to the top. So it's going to go to the more, let's say, non-personal, and it's going to do this movement here. Okay, like a clock, but the other way around. Yeah. So 353, 354. Tuk, tak. And then it goes beam, 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 beam. So it's 12 plus 1, 13. Yeah. 355. 357, and now here 350. No, sorry, 657. Now look how interesting this. The 353rd day in negative is the day 13. I think. Let me see that again. So I wanna express this intercommunication between past and future, future and past, okay? Let's see this a second, which is December. Wait a sec. Tends to be the 19th. Okay, so 353, the negative is 12. Why is this important? Because on the 12th day, its negative is 353, meaning the maximum past and the maximum future. So if we go to 358, 359, 360, 361, 362, 363, 364, 365, boom, boom, New Year. This day, which is the 31st of December. Now, the negative of this day, okay, is it's 0. It's 0. But what is it connecting with? Yeah, what is it connecting with? It's connecting with the first day of the year. Yeah, can you see that? The first day of the year. This would be -1 here. So from -1, we're going to the ending here, which would be the beginning. So if you see the end of 1 year, and if we go to the first day of the year, it's connecting, but in negative. It's the same points, but one is in positive, another one is in negative. Okay, meaning that every day is communicating with the future, and the future with that day, and so on. So really, this is, so when the year is going like this, progressing, what's happening is this. It's like ding, 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 ding. It's communicating with that future, the sequence of how things are going. Hopefully that you got that. So it's like the two very important days is the first day of the year, the last day of the year, because it's the maximum past and the maximum future. And it's that bridge of communication. So it's like, it's this, that in time also happens in space. So the ring of fire, it's kind of like when we do the derivation, it's like it's to the ring of fire, which that is like the non-linear aspect. Yeah. And that's that water is what's connecting with the centralized system. Yeah. So it's like a communication between water and land, land and water, water and land, land and water. Through what? Our water. Yeah. Because where your experience is retained and that information is provided to the centralized consciousness is water, and also another aspect, another mineral that is very important is iron, because the center of the earth is mainly iron, and in your blood, it becomes you work because you have iron in your blood. Without iron, there's no oxygen process wouldn't occur. So there is a communication taking part, okay, between land, water, centralized consciousness of the earth, water, land, centralized land, water, centralized consciousness of the earth. Yeah. And this is mainly occurring in this time is connecting with that space. Okay. So also what I want to show is not only a connection between future and past, but also between space and time. They are connected. Yeah? We divide it, but they connected. They have the same structure, and that structure is expressed. Because well, that's the best I can say. Okay, so this kind of the last days of the year are in this ring of fire. What is the ring of fire doing? It is you see when you've got melted gold, okay, melted gold. Then that melted gold, you can make it into anything. Yeah, you can make it into a beautiful ring. The making would be the first 352 days. It's like the making of the ring. But then at the end, where it's integrating, it melts again. So it's like the end is where the end product is received, but then it melts into a ring of fire in order to make a new version of it. So I'm not sure if that was kind of explained. So you make something beautiful. They give you liquid gold, okay? You make something beautiful out of it. Really, really nice. And you really make it as best as you can, okay? Each jewelry would be the year we are in within the period we're in, okay? That would be the integration there. And then you give it back to the source, that beautiful jewelry that you created. What does the source do? Beautiful, but I'm going to melt it again and give you again liquid gold. Yeah. So it's like that ending of the year where you are in the last day and you're in the zero. It's like that point is really, it's the maximum integration and disintegration. And that's where the new year begins, and it's like something like it renews the credit. It's like a renewal of the credit. Okay, you brought me something beautiful, great. Now I renew the credit, you know? See what you can do this year with the golden. Now that would be if we are in sequence and synchronicity with the renewal of the credit. What happens is that at the end of the day comes, and a lot of it like I wasn't able to finish it, you know. It's like I can only give you this crap, you know. It's like, okay, so that means you start the year in default. In default is that the word? In debt. You know, you start the year in debt, meaning that you are not really updates. You have like you've left non-expressed versions. Okay, so you're in debt. Nothing wrong with being in debt, but you can't increase your debt. Okay, so if you each year is an opportunity of renewal of your credit. If I could be more precise, at the end of the period is the opportunity of renewal of the credit. Yeah, that is like this, because that would be the last day of the last day of a leap year. That is really where you have to bring the jewelry in. That's really the moment, because that is like, what is the best you could do with this season? Remember, I was talking about 4 years as a season, each year as a chapter of the season. Yeah. So at the end of the season, it's like, it's the best moment, isn't it? Because it's like where the whole story comes together, but also something is going to be like, what's going to happen? Because there's another season beginning at the end. Yeah. So, so there. The 365, I was kind of explained before. It's also like where the Earth is positioned from the sun and what it's receiving from the membrane of the system, 3 and 6, and the logic that links them together. Yeah? Because look, the Earth during the day, it's connected with the sun. During the day, it's connected with the nucleus of the solar system. During the night, it's not looking at the sun, it's looking at the membrane. You know, the membrane of the system. Meaning it's looking at the aspect, it's receiving the aspect which is coming in a way out of the system to also renew the system. So during the night, It receives that, the Earth. You send it to the sun. Yeah, the sun sends you that. So that's kind of like what the Earth is doing. It's looking at the sun, but it's also looking at the we could say the peripheral nervous system. Yeah, so the central nervous system during the day, the peripheral. So we're doing that kind of double communication with the nucleus, with the membrane, with the nucleus, with the membrane, with the nucleus, with the membrane. Yeah. And that we're doing a day. And how long does it take the Earth to go around the nucleus in conversation with all others, all the brothers, you know, the planets and the membrane? 365 days. Yeah? And it has that night, day. Conversation with the nucleus, conversation with the membrane, conversation with the nucleus, conversation with the membrane. Because for something to work, you see in a cell, you have the membrane and then you have the organelles. Those are like the planets. So for the cell to work, the system that we operating in, there has to be a two-way conversation. Receiving what the membrane received, which comes out of the system, in order to also communicate, because the sun is communicating with other suns. Like, what is, like, if you see the sky, you know, and how all the stars are like, what does it look like? It looks like neurons, like activated, yeah? So, and quite a poetic way of seeing it is that really when you're looking at the sky, you're seeing the neurology of nothingness. You're seeing the neurological net of nothingness. You're seeing its nervous system. You see like the neurons that connect, and it very much looks like a brain, the same way internet. You see how technology is just all parts of fractals? So for our neuron to work, the nucleus of our neuron to work, our sun, it has to do synapses with the other neurons, yeah? And that's where the Earth, which is in communication with both areas, comes into play. Yeah? Because we said, well, what is space-time? A system of communication. For what? For the consciousness of nothingness. So how does the consciousness of nothingness create a communication of its information? It creates a nervous system. What is a nervous system? A nervous system is these aspects that are like suns, and they are all connected, and they have this kind of net. Yeah, and of course, like the brain, it must have different areas. You know, like if you touch one area in the brain, it does something to the body or the other. So I think that is very far out of our reach. But basically, when you see in the sky, you're seeing the neurological construction, the neurological net that nothingness has created in space-time to have a conversation with itself. Yeah. And we are part of it with a specific role on a specific planet in a specific system, but we are, you know, and it has to do with, and that specific role has a sequence in space and time, and this organization of time is a way of connecting with that process of increasing, of escalabilidad. Alejandro, to escalate awareness. Yeah. I would say that let's leave it here. Yeah, let's leave it here. Well, just to give you an example today, where we are in the feminine calendar, we would be in the feminine calendar today, lap 19 or 19 month, meaning we're more in the development period. We're not in the formation. Yeah? remember about this. We would be in this area here, so activating in the human period, and within the human area, we would be in the last day of it. So we would be in the decision of bringing that new activation from tomorrow, yeah, into the context. So, and doing this process, yeah.
David, where does where have you got the 19 from?
We are in the 19th lap.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Which is the 19th, how could we say, 19th month, the 19th month. Now, I would recommend the following because it does take quite a, how can I say, this is like a new language. It does take, this really increases, it's a very good strategy to increase your self-awareness of this technology called consciousness, space and time. But you do have to, like with a language, with a new language, you do have to just go very slowly, very nicely, whatever you get, whatever you don't get, whatever you understand, whatever you don't understand, respect your limits, because that's the only way to, if you want to understand the whole thing now and integrate the whole, you know, I want to get it now, that's not the way you learn a language. You can't do it that way. You have to have this patience of seeing where you are, where your limits are, what you understand and what you don't understand. So let's take it this way. The context, yeah? I'm having a conversation, imagine I'm learning French, okay? And the context, there's a French guy, and it's gonna talk to me in French. That's where I'm gonna see where I'm limited. That's where I'm gonna see my reach and my limitation, you see? So I'm talking with this person in French and I see, okay, that I understand, that I don't. And of course, I can get frustrated, like, oh, you know, why can't I? Okay, that's natural. Now, that is not gonna make me learn more. That's probably just gonna make me allowed to see where I am. I have to logically, like very neutrally see, okay, this is where I am in my knowledge of French. I've improved this and I'm here, okay? Okay, so I assume, I assimilate that. But then, how do we learn language? A lot of times, we just see the limits and something in our negative reorders and activates, and suddenly the next time I find myself with a French person, wow, I can speak a lot better. How did that happen? You see? So there's an area that is not voluntary. You know, there's an area that we have to give space for it to be assimilated. Yeah. And that is the upper part, you know, from the inhuman code to the human frequency. And in the context, we go to France. So that's like going there, the challenge of going to France. And then I can see again, okay, I've improved this, but I'm still weak here. Okay, I can see I have to improve the past tense or whatever it is. I see it in its logical sense. My negative recodes it, activates the frequency, back into the challenge with the context, and again and again. That's how I see that I'm growing in my capacity to learn French. Well, the same mechanism with this. You see, there has to be this respect for the slow process of internalizing it. My experience is that it really increases it gives you this neurological structure that really increases if you connect with it and you're patient with it and you involved in your life experience. It really makes your radio be able to open to other very, very subtle communications, yeah? So, like I said, let's leave it there. We've got 2 more modules because the next module we're going to go into what we call the tumi, which is, it's a challenge for me to explain. But what is the tumi? It's when you are born, you're born in a year. You're born in a year and you're born in a period. Now, when you are born, the future of that year is, how can I say, the future of the year is establishing the process of your development. Okay? What you do is walk the process, but that process has like a platform of neurological increase. Okay, so there's that's what and it's like certain dates, certain moments, certain periods of developments, which is called tumi. Why is it called tumi? Two reasons. One, because the tumi is a kind of knife that the Peruvians used in the Incan years to do brain surgeries. Literally, probably I'll talk about it more in the next, but and the Peruvian code is very important. It's 5-1, okay? 5-1. That is the impersonal logic becoming it's also called the biological unconscious, because the impersonal consciousness internalized within a biology. Okay, and also because to me is you and me, you and me, you and me. This has to do with basically how the context, tu, you, is coming, and how mi lógica, my logic, is translating that context. That has to do with my increase of my personal consciousness. It's how I'm opening to you, and how I am able to process and give sense to it within me. Tu, me. Tu, me. Okay? That's why it's called tumi. Tu from the context, me from the logic. Yeah. What logic do I have in me that makes sense of the tu of the context? Yeah. Tumi. Thanks for being open. I'm not sure. I haven't got a lot of feedback. I do understand that probably this is. I'm not sure. Maybe. To be honest, I have no idea, because I'm like the programmer waiting for the user to give feedback. You know, like I'm like the impersonal saying, okay, I created the story, I sent it there, but how did it come on the other side? I don't know. But if you have nothing to say, there's nothing to say. But I do understand that maybe this is a bit more, how can I say, technical, maybe, but hopefully you can assimilate it, process it, and it will activate a new version of your human frequency. Yeah. So, thanks a lot. Lots of love, and we'll be seeing you in the next. Very good. See, I don't know. I haven't. I'm not sure if this happens to you guys, but I don't have idea if it's clear, if it's how. I don't have. I don't know. When I'm emitting, I don't know what's happening on the other side a lot of time. Yeah?
I think, David, talking about the slow process, it is a slow process. It is for me, because I've done this workshop a couple of times already in Spanish. So vaguely, on some non-linear level, I had it. So you have clarified it greatly for me, but I can well understand, even in English, you get this the first time, and perhaps it is not so clear. It's frustrating. Yeah. But this, for me personally, this was very clear.
Good, because I don't know, especially this. I haven't talked so much about this in English, very few times. So what happens is that I know that the other things I've seen, quite, you know, the stencil, we've seen it quite a few times. This is, I think probably it's the second time, or I haven't explained it. So it does help me to see that, and also it helped me to, like the computer programmer, it would be interesting to see where things are not that clear and all that. Yeah? There is also other aspects where I think it's not so much about speaking anymore. There is this aspect where it's, okay, let's let it go, because this is still just a strategy. So there is this moment where, okay, now let's just let life do its thing with the strategy. You know, let's just see how this appears within your kind of day-to-day life. So very good, because Marjolein, I think you've never heard this, and for you, that's clear. Oh, that's. You know,
should we say something?
That's sure, and it's very new for me, but very clear today. Only the last part with the number 353, I only understand 60%. So I have to watch it again. But the rest, it was very clear today for me. But that's me, because I'm clear today, I think. But I'm very grateful. Thank you very much.
Wow.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay, good. Well, yeah.
Yeah, I had, you know, there's some wonderful moments in there in what you're saying. It was a journey. And and I enjoyed the journey, and I'm just thrilled to be on the road, and just new ideas is so exciting. So I really had some interesting moments when you were speaking, just of what's transferring, not just from the words, but just the energy. There was a So thank you. I really enjoyed it.
You see this feeling that we all have. Thanks a lot. Also, I think because I'm also, this is something that it's still something integrating within me. That's why I'm very interested in because it's explaining it. It's like allowing me to kind of also within my consciousness kind of get it. But you see, when you have this feeling that, okay, there is something that I'm understanding, something new I'm understanding, but I know that there's a lot of things that I'm not understanding, but is being captured in a different area. Okay, this area, that area. And then I know that this area at some point is going to filter it through to reality where I can see, oh, now I get it in my lineal. Yeah? This is the conversation. Okay, there's something that I'm getting in the lineal, and there's something that I'm not getting, but I know that it is hitting another area of me. That's it. That's basically what this is trying to do, but more kind of giving it a more detailed explanation of it.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thanks. Good, guys. So see you in the next module, module 3. And any questions or whatever, I'm gonna take a photo of this, send it to you guys, and whenever the recording is processed, it has, you see, it has to process in the negative for me to send it. And then you can have it in the context for you to consume it. So thanks a lot, okay?
Thank you very much, David.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.